Maria Santos had always been different from other girls in her small Texas town. While her classmates painted their nails and talked about boys, she spent weekends at the shooting range with her grandfather, a Vietnam veteran who taught her that precision was everything. Her steady hands and sharp eyes caught his attention immediately, but even he never imagined she would one day outshoot the military's most elite snipers. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Afghan mountains as Maria adjusted her scope for the third time. She had been lying in the same position for 6 hours, hidden among the rocks and scrub brush that dotted the hillside. Her ghillie suit blended perfectly with the terrain, making her invisible to anyone more than 10 feet away. The radio crackled softly in her earpiece as her spotter, Sergeant Thompson, whispered updates about enemy movement in the valley below. 3 days earlier, Maria had been just another Marine sharpshooter assigned to a routine patrol. She was good at her job, very good, but she had never been tested like this. The mission started as a simple reconnaissance operation to gather intelligence on Taliban movements near a strategic mountain pass. Intelligence reports suggested a small group of insurgents was using the area to smuggle weapons and fighters across the border. What they found instead was far more dangerous. The enemy had set up a sophisticated ambush designed specifically to target American Special Operations teams. Hidden bunkers lined the valley floor, connected by underground tunnels that allowed fighters to move unseen. Machine gun nests covered every approach, and sniper positions dominated the high ground. It was a killing field designed by someone who understood military tactics better than most generals. Captain Rodriguez, the mission commander, studied the valley through his binoculars with growing concern. His team of 12 included some of the finest soldiers in the Marine Corps, including 2 graduates from the elite Scout Sniper School. Staff Sergeant Williams and Corporal Jackson were legends among the sniper community, each with over 50 confirmed kills between them. They had trained for years to handle situations exactly like this one. The plan seemed straightforward. Williams and Jackson would establish overwatch positions on opposite sides of the valley while the rest of the team moved through the pass. Any enemy fighters who revealed themselves would be eliminated quickly and quietly. The remaining soldiers would then sweep through the area to gather intelligence and destroy any weapons caches they discovered. Everything went wrong within the first hour. Williams took position on the eastern ridge, his M40A5 rifle perfectly zeroed and ready. Through his scope, he could see movement in the treeline below, shadows that didn't belong in the natural landscape. He had made shots like this hundreds of times before, targets at distances that would challenge most marksmen. His breathing was controlled, his grip steady, as he lined up his first shot. The bullet struck exactly where he aimed, but instead of dropping his target, he watched in shock as the figure simply stumbled and kept moving. His target was wearing body armor, the kind of advanced protection that shouldn't have been available to ordinary insurgents. Before he could adjust his aim, muzzle flashes erupted from a dozen hidden positions throughout the valley. The enemy had been waiting. Jackson fared no better from his position on the western slope. His first shot also found its mark, but, like Williams, he discovered that his targets were better equipped and better trained than anyone had expected. These weren't ordinary Taliban fighters. They moved with military precision, using advanced tactics and equipment that suggested professional training. The radio exploded with urgent communications as the patrol found itself trapped in the valley below. Enemy fire came from positions that had been invisible moments before. Sophisticated camouflage and carefully planned fields of fire turned the entire area into a deadly maze. Captain Rodriguez realized they weren't fighting a ragtag group of insurgents, but a well-organized unit that had been preparing for this encounter for weeks. Williams and Jackson found themselves in an impossible situation. Every time they fired, they revealed their positions to enemy counter-snipers who seemed to know exactly where to look. The insurgents had obviously studied American sniper tactics and prepared accordingly. Within 2 hours, both elite marksmen had been forced to abandon their positions and retreat to secondary locations. The patrol was pinned down with no way out. Every movement drew accurate fire from multiple directions. The enemy had night vision equipment, advanced communications, and enough ammunition to maintain their assault indefinitely. Captain Rodriguez called for air support, but The nearest Apache helicopters were over an hour away, and the weather was deteriorating rapidly. That's when Maria volunteered for an assignment that everyone else considered suicide. She had been watching the battle unfold from her position with the reserve team on the northern ridge, while Williams and Jackson struggled against an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move. Maria had been studying the patterns of fire coming from the valley below. Her grandfather's lessons echoed in her mind as she traced the sources of enemy shooting, noting timing patterns and reload cycles that others had missed. The insurgents were good, but they had one weakness. They were fighting like soldiers, following standard military procedures and tactical doctrines. They moved in predictable patterns, communicated on regular schedules, and positioned themselves according to established principles of warfare. Maria realized that their strength was also their vulnerability. Captain Rodriguez initially refused her request. She was just a regular sharpshooter, not a trained sniper. She had never operated independently in combat, and the mission required someone who could function alone for hours or possibly days. The enemy had already proven they could neutralize the Marine Corps' best snipers. Sending another marksman into that environment would be sending her to her death. But as the situation deteriorated and casualties mounted, options became limited. The patrol was running low on ammunition, and several soldiers had been wounded seriously enough to require immediate medical evacuation. The weather was getting worse, which meant air support might not arrive in time. Something had to change, or the entire unit would be lost. Maria's plan was different from what Williams and Jackson had attempted. Instead of establishing a fixed position and engaging targets systematically, she proposed something that violated every rule in the sniper handbook. She would move constantly, taking single shots from multiple positions before relocating. She would avoid the obvious overwatch positions and instead use terrain that offered concealment rather than cover. Most importantly, she would target the enemy's weaknesses rather than trying to outshoot their strengths. While the insurgents had prepared for conventional sniper tactics, they weren't ready for someone who would operate like a ghost, appearing long enough to eliminate key targets before vanishing completely. Thompson, her spotter, thought the plan was insane. Professional snipers spent hours in single positions precisely because movement created opportunities for the enemy to detect and eliminate them. Maria's approach would require perfect timing, flawless execution, and luck that no soldier should count on. But as enemy fire continued to rake the valley where their fellow Marines lay trapped, conventional wisdom seemed less important than results. Maria checked her equipment one final time. Her M40A3 rifle was fitted with a Leopold scope that she had personally adjusted for the mountain environment. She carried only essential gear, trading protection for mobility. Her ghillie suit was customized with local vegetation that would help her blend with the specific terrain of this valley. As she prepared to descend into what everyone else considered a killing field, Maria thought about her grandfather's final lesson. He had told her that the difference between a good shooter and a great one wasn't about equipment or training. It was about understanding that every shot mattered, not just to complete the mission, but to bring everyone home alive. The sun was beginning to set as she started her descent toward the valley floor, carrying the hopes of 12 trapped Marines and the weight of a reputation that would either be made or destroyed in the next few hours. The first enemy fighter never knew what hit him. Maria had spent 40 minutes crawling through the rocky terrain, using natural depressions and shadow lines to approach within 300 meters of the valley floor. Her target was a machine gunner who had been keeping the patrol pinned behind a cluster of boulders for over 2 hours. His position commanded a perfect view of the entire southern approach, making rescue or retreat impossible. From her concealed position behind a fallen tree, Maria studied her target through her scope. The insurgent was professional in his movements, firing controlled bursts and changing positions regularly to avoid counterfire. He wore modern combat gear and used a weapon system that suggested military training. This wasn't some farmer forced to fight for the Taliban. This was a soldier. Maria controlled her breathing and waited for the perfect moment. The gunner had established a pattern, firing for 30 seconds before ducking behind cover to reload and reposition. During those brief intervals, he was vulnerable, but only for a few seconds. She would have one chance to make the shot count. The crack of her rifle echoed off the mountain walls as her bullet found its mark. The machine gun fell silent immediately, but Maria was already moving before the sound faded. She had learned from watching Williams and Jackson get pinned down. Staying in any position after firing was suicide against an enemy this well prepared. She crawled rapidly toward a new firing position, dragging her rifle and using every piece of cover available. Behind her, she could hear enemy voices shouting in Pashto as they tried to locate the source of the shot. They knew someone had taken out their machine gunner, but they couldn't pinpoint where the attack had come from. Maria's grandfather had taught her that patience was a sniper's greatest weapon, but in this situation, patience would get her killed. The enemy was actively hunting for her, using the same techniques that had defeated Williams and Jackson. She had to stay ahead of their search pattern while continuing to eliminate targets that threatened the trapped patrol. Her second target was a spotter positioned in a tree line approximately 400 meters to the east. Through her scope, she could see him directing mortar fire that was getting dangerously close to Captain Rodriguez's position. Every few minutes, explosions erupted closer to where the Marines lay trapped, and it was only a matter of time before someone was killed. This shot would be more difficult. The spotter was partially concealed by branches, and the angle required her to expose herself on a rocky outcrop with limited escape routes. If she missed, or if other insurgents spotted her muzzle flash, she would be trapped with nowhere to run. Maria settled into position behind a boulder that offered minimal cover but a clear line of sight. She could hear enemy fighters moving through the valley below, calling to each other as they coordinated their search. They were getting closer, but she couldn't wait any longer. The mortar fire was becoming more accurate with each round. The shot was perfect, a clean hit that dropped the spotter immediately. But as Maria prepared to move, she heard the distinctive whistle of incoming mortar rounds. Someone else had been watching the tree line, someone who had seen her muzzle flash and calculated her position. The first explosion landed 20 meters to her left, showering her with rocks and debris. The second hit even closer, and she knew the third would be right on target. She abandoned her careful crawl and sprinted toward a ravine that offered deeper cover, just as the third mortar round exploded exactly where she had been lying. The blast knocked her flat and filled her ears with ringing, but she was alive and uninjured. More importantly, she had eliminated two key targets and disrupted the enemy's ability to coordinate their attacks on the trapped patrol. But now they knew someone was hunting them, and they were adapting their tactics accordingly. From her new position in the ravine, Maria could see that the insurgents were regrouping. They had pulled back from their forward positions and were establishing a more defensive posture. This was exactly what she had hoped for, but it also meant her job was about to become much more dangerous. The enemy leader, whoever he was, clearly understood small unit tactics. Instead of continuing to pin down the patrol with overwhelming firepower, he was drawing his fighters into positions where they could support each other while hunting for the sniper who had disrupted their ambush. It was a smart move that showed professional military thinking. Maria realized she was now fighting two battles simultaneously. She had to continue eliminating threats to the patrol while avoiding an increasingly organized manhunt. The enemy had numbers, equipment, and local knowledge on their side. She had only her rifle, her training, and the element of surprise that was rapidly diminishing. Through her radio, she could hear Captain Rodriguez coordinating with the rest of the team. The elimination of the machine gun position had allowed them to move to better cover, but they were still trapped and taking casualties. Sergeant Murphy had been hit by mortar shrapnel, and Corporal Davis was running low on ammunition. Time was becoming critical. Maria studied the valley floor through her scope, identifying the positions where she believed the remaining enemy fighters had taken cover. There were at least 8 more insurgents spread throughout the area, each one representing a threat to her fellow Marines. But they were no longer operating independently. They had formed a coordinated defensive network that would be much more difficult to penetrate. Her next target had to be chosen carefully. She needed to eliminate someone whose death would disrupt their coordination while avoiding positions where she would be vulnerable to immediate counterattack. After several minutes of observation, she identified what appeared to be a communications specialist operating a radio from behind a rock formation near the center of the valley. Getting within range would require crossing open ground, where she would be exposed to fire from multiple positions. But the radio operator was clearly directing the enemy's movements, and eliminating him might cause enough confusion to give the patrol a chance to break out of their trap. Maria began her approach by moving along the bottom of the ravine, using its depth to stay hidden while she worked her way toward the valley floor. The rocky bottom was loose and treacherous, and every step had to be planned carefully to avoid creating noise that would reveal her position. Halfway to her intended firing position, she heard voices above her and froze. Two insurgents were moving along the rim of the ravine, searching for any sign of the sniper who had been picking off their comrades. They spoke quietly in Pashto, but their body language showed they were nervous and alert. Maria pressed herself against the rocky wall and controlled her breathing as the fighters moved slowly overhead. They were being methodical in their search, checking every possible hiding place and covering each other's movements professionally. If they decided to search the ravine itself, she would be trapped with nowhere to run. The minutes stretched endlessly as the insurgents continued their patrol above her. She could hear their footsteps on the loose gravel and their occasional whispered communications. They were close enough that she could have reached up and touched them, but any movement would mean immediate discovery and death. Finally, after what felt like hours, but was probably only 10 minutes, the voices began to fade as the searchers moved away from the ravine. Maria waited another 5 minutes before continuing her approach, knowing that the enemy was becoming more organized and dangerous with each passing hour. When she finally reached a position with a clear shot at the radio operator, she discovered that he had moved to a new location. The insurgents were rotating their positions regularly, making it nearly impossible to plan attacks in advance. She would have to adapt to their movements and take opportunities as they presented themselves. Through her scope, she spotted a new target, an insurgent who appeared to be directing other fighters from a position behind a fallen log. He was using hand signals to coordinate movements, which suggested he might be the unit leader. Taking him out could disrupt their entire operation, but the shot would be difficult and would certainly reveal her position to anyone watching. Maria settled into her firing position and began the careful process of lining up her shot. The target was approximately 500 meters away, partially concealed by vegetation, and moving occasionally as he communicated with his men. She would need perfect timing and flawless execution to make the shot count. As she prepared to fire, movement in her peripheral vision caught her attention. Another insurgent was approaching her position from the east, moving carefully but directly toward the ravine where she lay hidden. Someone had spotted something suspicious and was coming to investigate. Maria realized she was about to be caught between two impossible choices. She could take the shot at the enemy leader and hope to escape before the approaching fighter discovered her, or she could deal with the immediate threat and lose the opportunity to eliminate what might be the key target in the entire enemy force. The approaching footsteps were getting closer, and she could hear the distinctive sound of a weapon being readied for action. In a few seconds, she would be discovered whether she fired or not. The next few moments would determine not only her own survival, but the fate of 12 Marines trapped in the valley below. Maria made her choice and prepared to fire. The decision came to Maria in an instant that felt like slow motion. Instead of firing at the distant leader, she rolled silently to her left and drew her sidearm. The approaching insurgent was close enough now that she could hear his labored breathing as he climbed down into the ravine. He was being careful, but not careful enough. When he appeared around the boulder that had been concealing her, Maria was ready. 2 quick shots from her pistol dropped him before he could raise his weapon or call out to his comrades. The suppressor on her sidearm muffled the sound enough that it wouldn't carry far in the mountain air, but she knew she had only minutes before someone noticed he was missing. She quickly moved to a new position, leaving the body hidden behind the rocks. The enemy leader was still visible through her scope, but now he was alert and scanning the area where his man had disappeared. The opportunity for a clean shot was gone, but Maria had learned something valuable about her opponents. They were well-trained and well-equipped, but they weren't prepared for the kind of unconventional warfare she was waging. Over the next hour, Maria began a deadly game of cat, and mouse that would test every skill her grandfather had taught her. She moved constantly, never staying in one position long enough for the enemy to pinpoint her location. Her shots came from different directions at irregular intervals, targeting insurgents when they were most vulnerable. Her fourth kill was an RPG gunner who had been preparing to fire at the trapped patrol. The shot came from a position 300 meters to the south of where her previous attack had originated, confusing the enemy about her location and capabilities. Her fifth target was a sniper who had been trying to get a clear shot at Captain Rodriguez. That bullet came from the north, making it seem like multiple attackers were operating simultaneously. The psychological effect on the remaining insurgents was exactly what Maria had hoped for. They began to panic, firing at shadows and calling out positions that didn't exist. Their leader tried to maintain discipline, but fear was spreading through his unit like a virus. They had been hunters who suddenly found themselves being hunted by an enemy they couldn't see or predict. But Maria knew she was running out of time and ammunition. She had started with 40 rounds and had used nearly half of them. Each shot had to count now, and she needed to end this battle before the enemy regrouped or reinforcements arrived. The weather was deteriorating, with dark clouds gathering overhead that would soon bring rain and reduce visibility even further. Through her radio, she heard Captain Rodriguez coordinating what might be the patrol's last attempt to break out of their trap. They were down to 3 uninjured men, and their ammunition was critically low. If they didn't move soon, they would all be captured or killed when the enemy finally organized an effective assault. Maria made the decision that would define her legend among military snipers for years to come. Instead of continuing to pick off individual targets from concealment, she would use herself as bait to draw the remaining insurgents into a position where she could eliminate them all at once. The plan required perfect timing and enormous risk. She would reveal her position deliberately, making herself a target that the enemy couldn't resist pursuing. When they concentrated their forces to attack her, she would lead them into a killing field where their numbers would work against them instead of providing an advantage. She chose her position carefully, a rocky outcrop that offered good fields of fire but limited escape routes. From there, she could see most of the valley floor and would be visible to anyone looking in her direction. It was exactly the kind of position that professional snipers were trained never to use, which made it perfect for her purposes. Maria fired 3 shots in rapid succession, each one eliminating an insurgent, but, more importantly, each one coming from the same location. The muzzle flashes would be clearly visible to anyone watching, and the sound would draw every remaining enemy fighter toward her position. She was essentially painting a target on herself and hoping she could survive what came next. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The remaining insurgents, perhaps 6 or 7 fighters, began moving toward her position from multiple directions. They were coordinating their approach professionally, using cover and concealment while maintaining communication with each other. If she had been an ordinary sniper trying to hold a fixed position, she would have been dead within minutes. But Maria wasn't planning to stay fixed. As the enemy fighters approached, she began a fighting withdrawal that took them exactly where she wanted them to go. She fired single shots to keep them interested while moving steadily toward a narrow canyon that would force them to bunch up in pursuit. The canyon was a natural funnel that would eliminate the enemy's numerical advantage while giving her multiple positions from which to engage them. More importantly, it would prevent them from surrounding her position and would limit their ability to coordinate complex maneuvers. As the first insurgents entered the canyon, Maria was already in position at its far end with her rifle trained on the entrance. She had climbed quickly to a ledge that offered perfect concealment while providing a clear field of fire down the entire length of the narrow passage. The enemy fighters moved cautiously through the canyon, checking each potential ambush position as they advanced. They were being professional and careful, but they had walked into exactly the situation she had planned. They were trapped in a narrow space with limited cover and no way to use their superior numbers effectively. Maria's shots came in rapid succession now. The first insurgent dropped immediately, then the second. The others tried to find cover in the rocky walls of the canyon, but she had selected her position specifically to eliminate any safe hiding places. Her grandfather had taught her that terrain was a weapon just like any rifle, and She was using the canyon's geography to maximum advantage. The remaining fighters tried to retreat, but Maria was ready for that too. She had positioned herself so that the canyon entrance was also within her field of fire, trapping them between advance and retreat. Within 5 minutes, the entire enemy force had been eliminated by a single sniper who had used their own tactics against them. The silence that followed was almost overwhelming after hours of constant gunfire and explosions. Maria remained in position for several minutes, scanning the valley floor through her scope to ensure no other threats remained. The trap patrol was finally safe, but she needed to verify that no enemy reinforcements were approaching before declaring the area secure. When she was satisfied that the immediate threat had ended, Maria keyed her radio and reported to Captain Rodriguez. Her voice was calm and professional, showing no sign of the exhaustion and stress she had endured over the past several hours. She provided a precise assessment of the tactical situation and recommended immediate evacuation before additional enemy forces could arrive. The helicopter extraction came just as the mountain weather turned violent, with driving rain and strong winds that made the rescue operation extremely dangerous. As Maria climbed aboard the aircraft with the rest of the patrol, she could see the valley where she had fought the most important battle of her military career. Captain Rodriguez approached her during the flight back to base, his expression showing a mixture of admiration and disbelief. He had commanded Marine units for over 15 years and had never seen anything like what she had accomplished. 8 enemy fighters eliminated, an entire ambush neutralized, and 12 Marines brought home alive by a single sniper operating alone in hostile territory. The official report would describe the engagement in clinical military terminology, noting casualties inflicted and objectives accomplished. But among the special operations community, Maria's actions that day became the stuff of legend. She had done something that textbooks said was impossible, defeating a superior enemy force through skill, courage, and tactical innovation. The insurgent unit they had encountered was later identified as a special operations team trained by foreign military advisors and equipped with advanced weapons and equipment. Intelligence reports suggested they had been responsible for numerous successful ambushes against coalition forces and had never been defeated in direct combat, until they met a Marine sniper from Texas who refused to follow conventional tactics and chose instead to fight the kind of war her grandfather had taught her was sometimes necessary. Maria continued to serve with distinction for several more years, training other snipers and participating in operations throughout Afghanistan and other theaters. But she never forgot the lessons learned that day in the mountain valley, where she proved that individual courage and skill could overcome any odds when applied with intelligence and determination. The enemy had prepared for everything except a warrior who would write her own rules of engagement and fight a battle that existed only in her own mind until the moment she made it reality. That day, Maria Santos became more than just another Marine sniper. She became a legend that would inspire future generations of warriors to push beyond the limits of what others thought possible. Years later, when young snipers asked about that mission in the mountains, Maria would tell them the same thing her grandfather had taught her. Every shot matters, not because of what it proves about your skill, but because of what it means to the people counting on you to bring them home. On that day in Afghanistan, 12 Marines came home because one sniper refused to accept that elite enemy forces and impossible odds were enough to prevent her from completing her mission. The story of that battle became required reading at sniper schools around the world, proving that sometimes the most important victories come not from following the book, but from writing a new chapter entirely.